5,
4.
No, that's my job.
Oh, right. What do I have to do? Nothing.
4, 3, 2, 1. We are live, and Kiko's scratching at the door. Coming to you live. It's been live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, welcome to our brilliant and informed audience. This may be the most important show we've ever had.
Oh, come on.
Hey.
I don't buy that.
You know, we have all of these distractions, like the war in Iran. I'm not saying that's not important, but Iran does not pose an existential threat to the United States. And it was even unclear whether they have the motivation to develop a nuclear weapon. They certainly don't have the capacity to deliver it.
You think this is the most important show we've done?
Yes, because it focuses on our survival as a civilization and the real threat to our survival, which are none of the things that Trump, or for that matter, the Democrats are talking about. It's certainly not undocumented immigrants who pose no threat. Undocumented immigrants, according to every study, and I've cited them before, are the most law-abiding segment of our society, committing crimes, including violent crimes, at a fraction of native-born Americans. There's a reason for that. They don't want to be involved in the criminal justice system. New statistics have just come out from Syracuse University, their track system. 72% of those detained by Trump, undocumented immigrants, Sam, have committed zero crime. They've been convicted of no crime. Of the other 20%, the vast majority have been convicted of minor inconsequential crimes, like driving with a broken taillight or driving without an updated driver's license. But we now have new evidence about the fall of Rome.
Really?
Yes.
For you're saying this is brand new evidence?
This is new evidence within the last, less than a decade.
Oh.
You know, probably this fall of Rome is one of the most commonly studied events in history. You know, arguably the greatest empire ultimately fell. And there have been any number of explanations, right? Internal corruption, a hidebound bureaucracy, too much dependence upon slave labor, pressure from outside forces. One could go on and on. But new research, and that is directly apropos to what is facing the United States, suggests that while all of these explanations have some validity, there is a much more important underlying explanation for the fall of Rome, which now threatens the fall of our own civilization. I may sound hyperbolic, but I'm not.
It sounds hyperbolic.
I know, but I'm going to show how real this is.
Okay.
Here is what the latest research shows to the underlying causes of the fall of arguably the greatest empire over time, anyway, that the world has ever seen. There are other empires, you know, the Alexander's, the great Khans, the British Empire, but in terms of extent and duration, probably the Roman Empire was the greatest. Just as right now, America is the most powerful, the greatest power on earth. But it can well be brought down by the same things that brought down the fall of Rome. Two things which have kind of been neglected because they're not well understood, but the most up-to-date scientific and historical research points to these two factors. Do you know what they are, Sam?
Well, yeah, because you told me.
I told you. So it's like peeking at the test answers, right?
Well, the professor just told me the answers. I didn't peek.
Yeah. It's two things: climate change and pandemics.
Wow, really?
Climate change and pandemics. Hard to believe, but absolutely true.
There was climate change. I mean, not at the rate at what we're experiencing.
No. But it wasn't man-made climate change by industrial pollution, but it was climate change as a result of natural factors. And the point is, climate change can cause great swaths of destruction. The only difference is today we're producing it. It's not just natural as it was way back in early or late Roman times, in the 4th century of the Common Era. The Rome was said to fall around 476 of the Common Era, sometimes known as AD. Well, here is some of the most recent research published.
How recent?
Published in 2017.
That's not recent. You told me this was recent research. I thought this was published yesterday.
No.
What?
Scientific and historical research proceeds slowly. It doesn't happen overnight, and it is sustained. I'm looking at an analysis from yesterday. That's right. And so it has been sustained by additional research over the next 8 years. But this is the most comprehensive work, which is why I cite it, by Carl Harper, professor at the University of Oklahoma, who says, and I quote, "The fate of Rome was played out by emperors and barbarians, senators and generals, soldiers and slaves." That's the dramatic day-to-day common story. But he goes on to say it was equally decided by bacteria and viruses.
What?
Bacteria and viruses and solar cycles. It is a story in which humanity and the environment cannot be separated. I repeat that. Humanity and the environment cannot be separated. As this article that just came out yesterday says, the Roman Empire's agricultural output, which sustained the empire, depended upon climactic stability. And that climactic stability began to end in the period before the fall of Rome. What mattered then was the loss of temperate, stable, climactic conditions in much of the Mediterranean that was essential for sustaining the agriculture that was the base of the Roman Empire. The climactic conditions favored agricultural, economic, and population growth. But as the centuries approached the era of the fall of the Roman Empire, quote, changes, and this is from an article published yesterday, changes in Earth's tilt, reduced levels of solar energy penetrating the atmosphere. This shift impacted the climate, which became more variable, leading to aridity, arid conditions in the Mediterranean. This in turn impacted agricultural productivity, a factor in the multiple crises that the Roman Empire underwent. And what are we seeing today? Not from natural changes in the tilt of the sun or any other natural changes, but from man-made climate change. Aren't we also considering this incredible rise in arid conditions, right?
Yeah.
The desert, it's a hard thing to say, the creation of deserts all over the world, enormous debilitating heat waves, wildfires that are eating up viable land, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes. It's not a theory. It is right here on top of us. It's not the exact climactic conditions that contributed to the fall of Rome, but it is extremely similar. And scientists warn that we are at the point of no return, that if we don't actively, in an emergency way, in the next very few years, to deal with the climactic crisis. It may take on a momentum of its own in which it cannot be stopped, with catastrophic impacts on our society, undermining our ability to feed ourselves, creating climate refugees, poisoning our drinking water, burning up our lands, killing people with tornadoes, floods, fires, hurricanes. I know I sound hyperbolic, but it's here. It's real. And the science is now irrefutable. I laugh at the fact that, I think his name is Lee Zeldin, the head of the EPA under Trump, calls climate change a religion. No, the opponents of climate change are doing so based upon some strange religious belief. Climate change, it's not only, all you got to do is look at what's going on. You know, Trump says, don't believe your eyes and your ears, but do believe your eyes and your ears. Don't believe what they tell you, or believe what 98% of statured scientists, those who publish in rigorously evaluated peer-reviewed journals, have to say, that man-induced climate change is real, it's catastrophic, it's dangerous, and we are reaching the point of no return. And we've known this for a long time. Back in 2009, a group of business persons wrote a letter to then-President Obama on the eve of the Copenhagen Conference on Climate Change. And I'm paraphrasing, but very closely. The letter said, unless we do something immediately about climate change, the consequences are going to be devastating, Sam, devastating for humanity and our planet. And moreover, this can be done with advancing, not harming the economy as we move from fossil fuel to safe, clean, renewable sources of energy. I know you know the answer to this one, Sam.
I do.
Who signed that letter?
Donald Trump and his family.
Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, and Eric Trump. 16 years ago. And, of course, the climate science is way more established and assured in the ensuing 16 years, as well as all the immediate effects that you can see with your own eyes and hear with your own ears. So what's changed is the religion. Donald Trump's belief, quite accurately, that if you're going to succeed in the Republican Party, you got to forget about science, you got to ignore your own eyes and ears, and you've got to become a climate change denier, or at worst, an extreme climate change skeptic. Donald Trump knew this 16 years ago, and except for a very tiny handful of scientists, mostly connected to the fossil fuel industry, the overwhelming consensus validates human-caused climate change and the fact that we are very close to the point of no return and could suffer the same fate as the fall of Rome, which now, as I pointed out from this research, has a fundamental basis in climate change. But the other basis was pandemics.
Oh, God.
Pestilence. Plagues. Which periodically devastated Rome in the period leading to the fall of Rome. It also affected other parts of Europe. And there are those scientists and historians who postulate that the invasion of the Huns, the so-called barbarians, a very bad name, that contributed to the fall of Rome was partly induced by the plague and loss of agricultural productivity from climate change, that they were driven to conquer and expand into new territories. Now, we just suffered the devastating effects of a pandemic. It wasn't that long ago, right, Sam?
Right.
How many Americans died?
A million plus.
Over 1 million, right? devastated our economy, led to one of the deepest recessions. And we are now vastly more vulnerable both to climate change and to pandemics as a result of current federal policies. What has the Trump administration done about climate change, Sam?
They've messed us up real bad.
They've reversed it. Not only are they not doing anything about it, despite what Trump told us 16 years ago, but they are reversing efforts to stem catastrophic climate change, pushing us ever closer to the point of no return. They've erased climate change from the entire federal government. You can't even talk about it. You can't even mention it. You can't even write about it. You certainly can't do any research about climate change. And instead of promoting clean, renewable sources of energy, what is the administration promoting?
Burn up the fossil fuels.
Right. Drill, baby, drill. Put out those fossil fuels, which are pushing us ever closer to the point of no return. And as Trump admitted 16 years ago, we don't need for our economy. That the future of our economy and that anywhere around the world lies in the new technologies of clean, safe, renewable energy. But instead of recognizing what he knew 16 years ago, Trump has reversed it all.
Dumbass.
And made it so much more dangerous for us in terms of climate change. Now, what about our vulnerability to pandemics, to plagues? Has the administration strengthened so we don't have another pandemic like we saw in 2020?
They put that bozo RFK Jr. in charge of our health.
Exactly. They put a purveyor of quack science in charge of our health. If you don't believe me, look at the papers that they've put out citing non-existing research that doesn't exist. They called it a formatting error. I've written a lot of papers. I know what formatting is. Formatting is, where I don't have my subtitles quite in the right place. Is formatting citing non-existing sources, Sam?
No.
No, that's an error I would not tolerate in my freshman students. And this is our chief health officer. And even when they tried to correct it, they misinterpreted studies that do exist. And they've appointed a bunch of quack scientists, unqualified, or at least not nearly enough qualified, to the Vaccine Advisory Board, who are already casting doubt on the safety of vaccines, contradicting decades of studies establishing their safety. You don't have to prohibit vaccines. All you got to do is to cause a problem and make us so much more vulnerable to disease is to cast doubt on vaccines. We saw that with RFK Jr.'s visit to Samoa, where, according to press reports, at least indirectly, his attack on vaccines caused 86 deaths among children. Now, 86 deaths, he said, that's just moderate. But the population of Samoa is 216,000, not 340 million. Project that onto the U.S. population, and you are talking about over 100,000 deaths. But to the extent you cast doubt on vaccines, you make people less willing to take vaccines, then you are undermining our most important, most significant weapon against the kinds of plagues that contributed to fall of Rome. But it doesn't stop there, right?
No, it must.
They've done much more than that.
Oh,
what have they
God.
done to scientific and medical research, Sam?
Boink.
They've slashed scientific and medical research. They've cut our public health services, which are our first line of defense against any kind of pandemic. They've withdrawn us from the World Health Organization, which means we are handicapped when it comes to coordinate internationally dealing with pandemics. Do germs and viruses respect international borders, Sam?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Oh, we can't go beyond the border of the United States. So, we now are absolutely handicapped. We've frozen funding for critical USAID programs, including programs that bring vital medicine and medical care to the poorest countries of the world. And again, we're a global world. You can't isolate the United States from outbreaks anywhere in the world. I could go on, but it's crystal clear that not only are current policies not protecting us from catastrophic climate change, from the possibility of another pandemic, the kinds of things that underlay the fall of Rome, it's making them much, much worse. And this is a vastly more serious threat to our civilization than anything that's going on in the country of Iran. It's flash. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but it's an utter distraction from things that matter infinitely more for our well-being and our survival and the thriving of our civilization. I don't mean to be a downer, but I've got to call them as I see them. And once you start denying science, reversing what science tell you we need to do to protect ourselves, then you've advanced and exacerbated an existential threat to our country and indeed to the world. Anything you want to add to this, Sam?
I don't got nothing to add.
You got nothing to add.
No. You're scared.
It's you young people.
You who?
Young
Me?
people like you.
Oh.
Who are, of course, going to bear the brunt of this, not old folks like me.
I know, it stinks. I don't want to bear the brunt of this.
Yeah, you don't want to be in a climate crisis. All right. The other thing I want to point out is my utter and complete disgust with the Democrats.
Boo-hoo.
Boo-hoo. What does our T-shirt say? What have we been saying for 2 years?
Republicans have no principles. Democrats have no spine.
Right. I'm not harp enough about Republicans having no principles. I've talked a lot about Democrats having no spine, but that's what I want to focus on right now. We had a stunning result in New York, Sam, right? What was that? In the mayor race.
Zohran won.
Came out of nowhere. Zohran Mamdani came out of nowhere to win the Democratic nomination. Kind of an unknown council person from Queens, a naturalized U.S. citizen. So instead of celebrating and learning what they can from a guy who can come out of nowhere and galvanize such support, what have the Democrats done?
Complain,
wring your hands, worry, fret. Oh my God, this guy's so progressive. Guess what? The Republicans might attack us for that. And we can't bear Republicans attacking us, Instead of learning from what this guy did, he sparked thousands upon thousands of young people volunteering.
Right.
Has Chuck Schumer and the other, old line Democrats done that in recent years?
Chuck Schumer's boring.
They're so boring. They're so yesterday. They're so devoid of any kind of excitement. And instead of drawing on this guy's excitement, instead of drawing on the way he brought out volunteers, instead of drawing on the way he used the internet, instead of drawing on the way he inspired young people, they're all wringing their hands and worrying about Republicans attacking them because this guy is too progressive.
Give me a break.
Give me a break, exactly. Do Republicans only attack Democratic progressives?
Pretty much.
No, they attack every Democrat.
What?
They've attacked Nancy Pelosi, who is hardly, a radical left-winger.
Wait,
They've
who?
attacked Chuck Schumer. They attack anyone.
Wait, I've lost.
You lost the train.
I lost the train.
This is the Merrick Garland era. You would think they learned from that. Oh my God, I can't, take a strong stand because I might get criticized by Republicans.
Right.
Who, of course, will criticize him no matter what.
Oh, you're talking about Republicans here.
Right. I'm talking about the Democrats being afraid to be bold because they're scared of being attacked by Republicans who are going to attack them anyway.
Good point.
Like they did with Merrick Garland, like they do with Chuck Schumer, like they do with Nancy Pelosi, like they do with Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. These are not young, firebrand progressives, are they? I mean, here's another old line, tired Democrat. A friend of mine, like Merrick Garland, actually, Larry Summers, who was Treasury Secretary way back under Obama. I'm profoundly alarmed about the future of the party because of the New York City results. We have to be afraid. Hang on, I want to find another quote. If you hold my... You can sing to them or something.
I wear my sunglasses at night so I can it burn. No.
Mark Bennett, co-founder of the centrist Democrats, said his affiliation with the Democratic Socialists of America is very dangerous. It's already being weaponized by Republicans. Oh my God, Republicans are going to attack us. And so we have to retreat and be nothing more than Me Too Republicans. Haven't they learned that those kind of candidates almost never win?
Right.
It's just unbelievable. They don't have to endorse all of Mamdani's ideas. That's not the point. Some of them are great, some of them are not. That's true of every politician. But they failed to learn from him. And that's what spineless Democrats should be doing instead of cowering, putting their head in the sand, and worrying about Republican attacks. Learn how he was able to stimulate thousands of volunteers. Learn how he appealed to young men who otherwise have been drifting away from the Democratic Party. Learn how he put together an interracial coalition. Learn how he used the internet. Stop cowering in fear. Playing not to lose is a recipe for what, Sam? Losing. And the Democrats have been losing. And they're somehow afraid of anything new. And
lame.
And again, you don't have to endorse everything he says, but there's so much that can be learned from his campaign. And instead of learning, they're fleeing in terror.
Lame.
It's just a dismaying spectacle. And one who isn't is maybe the oldest one of all. And who's that? Who isn't fleeing and is learning from him?
Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders. You know, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and now Mamdani are the only Democrats who've sparked any excitement, any interest, right?
Right.
You know, let's not follow the Larry Summers, Chuck Schumer path down to party defeat. Let's move into, finally, at least the 21st century and try to learn from what we can from this incredible mayoral campaign. And, you know, now we've got these old fossils, Andrew Cuomo, you know, and the utterly corrupt Mayor Adams, who did that corrupt deal with Trump, yelling and screaming, of course, about the dangers of Mamdani and threatening to run independent campaigns, as if they had anything whatsoever to offer.
Well, I think Cuomo did concede, and he said he wasn't going to...
He did concede, but he said he didn't rule out running as an independent.
I thought he did, but maybe I was wrong.
Well, I saw this tonight. Said he conceded the Democratic nomination, but he didn't rule out running as an independent. You know, usually if you're independent, you have something new and exciting to offer, right? That's why you're independent.
Right.
That's why you're not in the mainstream parties. He's just an old, tired politician. I have nothing against him particularly, but he has nothing new to offer. And I have a lot against Eric Adams. Totally corrupted politician who is just a disaster and is playing, of course, right into the hands of the Republicans with whom he made that deal, will withdraw your indictment in return for favors to us. I looked at some of the Republican justifications as to why there was no quid pro quo, and one of them was, Mayor Adams said there was no quid pro quo. That's really persuasive, isn't it?
No, that's not persuasive at all, actually.
Of course not. And, we don't need Cuomo. We don't need Adams screwing up this race and possibly handing New York City to the Republicans. And, of course, the Republicans are already calling Mondami a communist, a terrorist sympathizer.
Oh, give me a break.
Yes. One Republican has called for revoking his naturalization and deporting him. Rock lyrics from 8. It's got a lot of credibility. It's the same Republican who introduced a resolution to give Trump a third term, contrary to the Constitution.
What an idiot.
Yeah. This is the kind of thing we're dealing with. And this is what the Democrats are afraid of. Come on, grow a spine. Buy my T-shirt and grow a spine. All right. I think we've said enough. I'm running out of gas here.
Okay, cool. Nice job.
I'm just so dismayed by the Democrats.
I know, they stink.
They really do. And, the only group worse than the Democrats are the Republicans. Doesn't give us much of an alternative.
Also, if you're interested in climate change stuff, you should check out voteclimatepac.org. That's Vote Climate US PAC. That's my mom's climate change organization. So check that out.
It is the only organization anywhere that gives you a voter's guide, not just to incumbents, not just to the voting record, but to challengers based upon the positions they have taken. So you can actually compare incumbents and challengers and make a rational decision to vote climate. And it deals both with federal and with state offices. It is a unique, extraordinary resource. And as Sam said, check it out.
All right, with that, we'll do some housekeeping before we get to questions. You can follow us. Our usernames are below. We've got 1,600 people watching, only 500 likes. That's crazy. Please like the stream. It helps us out a lot. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Click that notification bell so you know we're live. Donations and memberships get priority in questions. And Dad, I've got good news for everybody out there. If you saw us last week, you already know this. But if you weren't, our merch shop is live. We've got a ton of great stuff. Savannah, if you would pin the link to that in the chat, it's allan-lichtman.printify.me. You can get a Republicans Have No Principles, Democrats Have No Spine shirt. This is probably the most popular one we've got. And a lot of other cool stuff. I love Lichtman Live, Lichtman Loyalist. Comes in a sweatshirt.
Hey, how about me from 45 years ago?
Your goofy smile.
Yeah.
Check it out.
I defeated 20 opponents on tic-tac-toe back then.
Dang, bro.
Pretty good, huh? I was the big winner of 1981.
But you're unwilling to answer my goofy trivia questions.
Absolutely. I'm too old for trivia now.
Oh, I see. Okay.
When I was young and sharp, I was about your age then. I was 34.
Whoa.
Pretty close.
That was you. So that was you at 34?
I was 34 then.
Wow. You
like my mustache?
Yes.
Your mom does not.
Oh. That's why I don't have one.
Doesn't matter. She didn't know me then.
True. All right, let's get to our question portion of this show. A very fun portion of this show where we ask questions to this guy, Allan Lichtman. You ask questions, members and donators.
And we get great questions. And, I can't necessarily answer all of them. I think I do pretty much. But if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you.
Really?
I'm not going to fabricate like Trump.
Oh.
We just had the bombing. There's been no assessment, but we know it totally obliterated their nuclear capacity. Come on.
Trump's a dummy.
Oh, my God. No, it's not so dumb.
Oh.
He's not smart, but he's cunning. Here's what he's thinking.
Right.
That's all anyone's going to remember.
Right.
Is what Trump said. They're not going to follow the defense intelligence agency. They're not going to tune in to hearings and briefings. All they'll remember is Trump said we totally obliterated, at least his base. But I think, most Americans are now wise to him. I just saw the latest Gallup poll, which is kind of the gold standard. And he was like 17 points underwater in the Gallup poll, something along those lines. Just extraordinary. And it would be even worse than that, except for strong support from Republicans. But he's way underwater, even among independents.
All right, our first question is from Krasimir Boyanov, who also gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
They say, Professor, how to fight the oil industry if we have such a big reliance on the automaking industry? Why didn't Trump side with the solar-based energy? And why does he still keep the gas-burning lords?
Hey, remember, right at the beginning of his campaign, he went to the oil executives, the uber-rich. Exxon has more revenue per year than the GDP of many, many countries around the world. They're, floating in cash. And he said, support me and finance me, and I'll give you anything you want. It doesn't matter. And he has been hand in glove with the fossil fuel industry for a very long time. And despite what he said 16 years ago, politics for Trump has overridden our safety and our well-being and the hard science. It's just sheer politics and sheer ego, unfortunately.
This is from Dave, one of our members. I say, I recall 410 that Rome fell when the barbarians sacked it because of payment of past military services was not met by honoris. Will the U.S. face a similar fate of debt being the reason of a financial collapse? In comparison, China is expanding its influence in trade. The U.S. is contracting trade with its neighbors. Will this weaken the U.S. and strengthen China?
I basically agree with everything this very smart member has said. Obviously, there are many factors involved in the fall of Rome, and one of them is a financial crisis. But that was also brought on by the devastating effects of pandemics and climate change. They're all intertwined and related. And I am very worried about the U.S. burden of debt. And if Trump's, and I won't call it the big, beautiful bill, I don't understand why the media buys into Trump's nomenclature, which is so inaccurate. Much more accurate was, although I hate to validate anything he says, Elon Musk, who called it a disgusting abomination, which if it passes is likely to blow another big hole in our deficit, which absolutely weakens the U.S. relative to China. And again, while Trump is, absorbed with Netanyahu, who's playing him like a fiddle in the Middle East, the real danger, aside from climate change and pandemic, which is fundamental, but in terms of international challenge, where does it come from, Sam? Not Iran. China. And so I think Dave is right on point.
$20 donation from Diego Yanes Holtz. They say, one thing people don't get is that immigrants don't only do jobs that Americans don't want to do, but there isn't enough native-born Americans to take these jobs. Our TFR is below replacement level at 1.6 children per woman.
Absolutely right. Trump, in a moment of clarity, said, oh my gosh, I'm deporting these immigrants who are essential to American agriculture and American business. And there had reports that he had undocumented immigrants doing menial jobs in his own properties. The truth is, he recognized that what he's doing has potentially a very negative impact on American agriculture and American industry. And I just saw an article today validating the fact that, yes, we are below replacement level. Our population is expanding solely because of immigrants who are not taking jobs away from Americans, but who are contributing to our economy and also contributing to the tax base. You take out these undocumented immigrants, not only are you going to be spending huge amounts of money, who knows where the bill is now, this disgusting abomination, but at least at one point it was increasing ICE's budget, get this, Sam, by $155 billion. That alone is likely far more than Elon Musk's cut ever saved the federal government. So not only is it costing us a huge amount to implement this crazy deportation scheme, but it's also robbing the Treasury of tens of billions of dollars in taxes that undocumented immigrants pay. Let's not forget, they pay taxes, contrary to what you might hear.
Yeah, this administration is constantly lying about their payment of taxes, their burden on the economy and infrastructure and healthcare. They lie about it constantly, basically. Ivana with a $10 donation. They say, I have an idea. I think it's kind of cool. Have a challenge. If Allan Lichtman gets 250,000 subscribers, Dr. Lichtman grows his mustache back for 1 week.
It says followers, not subscribers. I assume they mean subscribers.
It's the same thing.
All right. Ivana, are you going to help us get there? We need help. We're so we're at like 170. So we should put a time limit on it. Like if we get to 250,000 subscribers in X amount of time, you'll grow by the end of the year.
Okay, so if we get to 250,000 subscribers by the end of the year, you'll do a week with a mustache.
I will, and I expect Ivana and other subscribers and members to help us get there.
Okay.
We can't just do it by ourselves.
Nice. I can't wait to see your mustache.
Well, let's hope we get to 250.
Let's hope. Professor, enriched uranium is still at large in Iran's nuclear facilities, and they can still be put back in action in months. Is this not a recipe for another war in the near future? What do you think, sir?
Yeah, you've heard me say many times, you don't solve these problems by violence militarily. You know, Dwight Eisenhower, one of our greatest generals, when he was president, resisted military solutions. For example, there was tremendous pressure on him to intervene in Southeast Asia to protect the French colonies, and he refused. Said, I'm not going to do it. He didn't join Britain and Israel in their attack on Egypt in 1956. Talked about the need to solve the Palestinian-Israeli issue, but said there isn't a military solution to that problem. We don't know whether enriched uranium is. You know, Trump's big mouth signaled well in advance to Iran what he was going to do. Right, Sam?
Yeah.
They knew it. So that gave them plenty of chances to sequester, talking about, 900 pounds or something along those lines of uranium enriched to 60% pretty easily. You could get it up to 90%, which is weapons-grade fuel. So we have no idea whether that fuel is still survived or where it is, or whether they have other centrifuges to enrich it. Again, Trump gave us, like the moment after, totally made up answer to what the effect of the bombing had been, saying it totally obliterated their capacity for nuclear weapons, and the more intelligence that comes out. And they're furious about that. They care more about the intelligence coming out than the substance of the intelligence. They just as soon keep us in the dark so we can only believe what Trump tells us. So everything about their nuclear capacity is still utterly uncertain.
$5 donation from Mega Games 1000. They say, Professor, what do you think about the big ugly bill being halted by the Senate parliamentarian?
Very important and very significant. She's doing her job. They tried to get this bill through something called reconciliation. Do you know what that is, Sam?
I've heard it before.
That's when you're dealing with bills on fiscal policy restricted. You don't need 60 votes. They can be passed without a filibuster. You just need 50 plus 1, which could be the vice president breaking a tie. And she ruled quite a few provisions of this disgusting abomination bill could not be passed under reconciliation. And if they want to vote on the bill under reconciliation, these provisions have to be stripped out, including one of the worst provisions, which was to gut the ability of the federal courts to rein in illegal and unconstitutional actions by the Trump administration, as well as various provisions pertaining to food stamps and other aspects of the bill. The bill is really in crisis now. But I have to say, I take with a mountain of salt all of the commentaries saying, oh, you know, they're Republican holdouts, they won't vote for the bill. How much credence do you give to that, Sam?
Not much.
Not much. How often have Republicans stood up to Donald Trump and taken principled votes?
Like never?
Like never, yeah. I mean, if they could vote for Pete Hegseth and RFK Jr. to hold two of the most important positions in our country, then indeed they validate my point that they have no principles.
Right. Patrick Murray asked, thoughts on the Supreme Court?
Oh, Patrick Murray, an old friend of ours.
Yeah. They say, what are your thoughts on the Supreme Court today ruling that states can defund Planned Parenthood?
I thought that was an abomination. You know, it's South Carolina, which doesn't have abortions anyway. It bans abortions, I think, after 6 weeks when women don't even know that they're pregnant. So it seems to me clearly beyond the power of any executive order to deny funding to an organization that's not violating the law by offering abortions. And its substantive effect is devastating because what Planned Parenthood does is provide vital gynecological and prenatal care to women. You wipe out Planned Parenthood, all you've done is harm the health of American women, just as we talked about so many other things that this administration is doing is undermining our health and our well-being.
This is from one of our Discord members. If you want to join the Discord, the link to that is in the link tree, which is in the description of this video. So go to the description of this video, go to the link tree, and there should be a little Discord icon that you click on to join.
I still don't know what Discord is, but maybe I don't have to.
You don't have to.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. This is from Nano Rider. They say, Professor, I wish to ask about China versus the Philippines conflict. During Biden's term, China became much more forceful towards the Philippines. Now it seems to be flaring up again during the Israel-Iran war. The Philippines have a defensive treaty with the U.S. Do you think we should be worried about China escalating matters with the Philippines, with Trump being distracted?
Absolutely. As I said, you know, the real existential danger to us is catastrophic climate change because we're approaching the point of no return, and it affects everyone. But in terms of international relations, the real threat is not Iran, far and away. The real threat is Russia, and even more so, China. And Trump is definitely distracted. Our military resources are not being focused there. I'm not predicting anything, but we need to keep an eye both upon Chinese aggression towards the Philippines and towards Taiwan.
Oh, our good friend, Vacuum Tubes for Hi-Fi.
Oh, one of our great friends.
They say climate change is creating arid conditions on the Great Plains and lowering water levels on the Colorado River. I don't see how agriculture and civilization can survive in California and the Great Plains if they become deserts.
And that'll affect everyone because of the foodstuffs that's being produced by California and the Great Plains. You can't isolate the effects of climate change. That's exactly the kind of thing we talked about tonight that was significantly implicated in the fall of Rome, and that directly threatens the fall of our own civilization if we don't do something very quickly and very dramatically about it. By the way, there is also information, your very smart mom apprised me of this, that the Mayan civilization also likely fell because of climate change and its effect on their agriculture.
Wow. Darren Brown says, I'm concerned with the rise of anti-Semitism from the left. Candidates like Mamdani, who fail to condemn Hamas post-October 7th and blame Israel, and who do not recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, are not the answer. This puts progressive Jewish voters in a bind. Do you agree or not? And what is your opinion of the anti-Semitism sentiment coming from the left?
There is certainly some anti-Semitism from the left, far dwarfed by anti-Semitism coming from the right. And if you've been following, I'm not going to go into it now, so I don't have much time, but I've detailed in great specificity all the significant anti-Semitism coming from the right. Was it a left-winger who killed, I think something like a dozen Jewish worshipers at the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh, Sam?
No.
No, it was a right-winger parroting Trump's rhetoric about an invasion, which he said was being aided and abetted by the Jews. And as we know, Republicans have consistently claimed, that George Soros was stirring up black people, paying them to riot, provoking a race war.
Why is it? I want to be paid to riot, and why is nobody paying me to riot?
Oh, have you rioted for nothing?
Yeah, I rioted for nothing. No, I've
nothing.
I've
You're
never
a sucker.
rioted.
No, you don't riot.
No.
But yes, I'm concerned about anti-Semitism at every level, which is why I said we don't have to. And I don't know in detail if what you said about Mandami is right, but we don't have to accept everything he says not to learn from the extraordinary things he did. There's a big distinction there. And as I said, the gravest danger from anti-Semitism, although there is on the left, and I condemn it, is from the right. And we've talked about this so many times. There isn't an easy answer to the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Yes, Hamas is an awful, horrible terrorist organization that perpetrated an awful atrocity. But we cannot ignore the atrocities committed by Prime Minister Netanyahu and his cabinet in Gaza, killing tens of thousands, we don't know the exact number, but certainly tens of thousands of civilians, including civilians in refugee camps or online to get aid, putting in a blockade that's caused famine and disease. I've talked about this before. I am a strong supporter of Israel, have been for 60 years. I firmly believe in Israel's right to defend itself. But that doesn't mean I support Netanyahu. I think he is the biggest disaster that's ever happened to Israel. He's made Israel an international pariah when historically Israel has always been a moral beacon and model for the world.
We're at like 885 likes.
Got to get there.
Let's get to 1,000, guys.
Yeah,
Help
we've
us
had
get to
over
1,000.
10,000 views. How much time do we have left?
About 7 minutes.
Oh, we can take at least 5 questions.
What do you think Michael Bolton thought listening to Trump's musings on Iran at the recent press conference? The whole friendly game of catch and oil trading advice.
I'm not sure what... Michael Bolton?
Michael Bolton.
There is a Bolton who was former
Yeah.
national security advisor, but it's not Michael Bolton. What?
It's not Michael Bolton?
No.
Let me see. Bolton.
He was very critical of Trump, but he loves the war in Iran because he's
John Bolton.
John Bolton. Yeah. So I don't know who Michael Bolton is. So.
He must mean John Bolton. What do you think about John Bolton thought listening to Trump's musing on Iran at the recent press conference?
I have no idea. I assume that Bolton, as far as I know, and I don't follow him because I have no interest in him. He has no power. He's out of office. He's a big supporter of aggressive military action in the Middle East.
Right. He's a war hawk, isn't he?
He is a war hawk. He's one of those neoconservatives that supposedly Donald Trump was repudiating. Remember, Donald Trump ran in opposition to the John Boltons of this world, promising he's not going to get us involved in any more wars, and certainly not getting us involved in another war in the Middle East.
Apparently Michael Bolton is a singer.
Oh, got me. I don't know who that is. If you don't know who he is, you can't expect an old codger like me to know.
I do know. Well, he's from an earlier generation. He's
and
not
what does he have to do with Trump?
I think there's that he just miswrote.
He met John Bolton.
Yes.
Okay, that I answered.
How did the slogan "Workers of the World Unite" reflect the goals of international socialism, and what challenges did it face in uniting workers across national, racial, and cultural lines?
This is very important.
Oh.
Although Zoran Mandani and Bernie Sanders call themselves democratic socialists, they are not, Sam. When socialists talk about this old slogan, workers of the world unite, they mean that we are moving towards the classless society in which there are no bosses, that everybody shares in everything. And the way you get there is first by the government nationalizing and taking over all of the means of production, all the farms, the banks, the businesses. That is not what Mandami or Sanders are about. They are not socialists, certainly not communists, whatever Trump may say about them. They are more social democrats along the lines, for example, of the social democratic movements that have been so successful in the Scandinavian countries. Unlike a socialist, a social democrat does not believe in government taking over everything, but believes in progressive reforms to advance the interests of ordinary workers, things like minimum wages, collective bargaining rights, greater access to education and housing, perfectly respectable progressive reforms that have nothing to do with socialists taking over the means of production in the United States. I can't stress this too much because the confusion there is immense. And I don't know why they call themselves democratic socialists rather than much more accurately social democrats.
Interesting. I don't think your average American is going to distinguish that, but...
No, but I still think it's important.
Okay.
How much more time?
About 3 minutes.
All right, we can take 2 or 3 more questions.
This is from Erlkis. You think that's how you pronounce that? E-R-L-K-I-S. Erlkis?
Got me.
Okay. They say
that sounds reasonable.
They say, "Thank you, Professor. I'd love to know how successful Trump would be in appointing a special counsel and thus winning an investigation of the 2020 election that he still claims was stolen. He said he wants to begin this now. How is this possible, given he was thrown out of 60 courts, as well as Fox having paid over $700,000 in fines for lying about the
That's $700 million, not
$700 million in fines for lying about the so-called stolen election.
Look, Trump can do whatever he wants. It's within his power to appoint a special prosecutor or a special counsel. But anything that went on in 2020, the statute of limitations has already passed. So there can't be a real criminal investigation. There can be a kangaroo court kind of investigation. Just, that's not real. That's not, requiring the kind of proof beyond a reasonable doubt or even, probable cause, but, any kind of cosmetic investigation. And you really can't stop Trump from doing it. It's absurd. Not only did he lose 60 cases, lost every consequential case, but a lot of them were being tried by conservative judges appointed by Republican presidents, and some, Sam, appointed by what president?
Himself.
Couldn't win any of them.
What a loser.
Yeah. Not to mention his own Department of Justice, his own cybersecurity agency, every state official, most of them Republicans, investigations by independent organizations. What have every one of them found?
Deadly.
Exactly. Nothing.
You want to rub my head?
Is that good luck for me?
Yeah. All right. One more question or two more questions?
What time is it?
9:59.
Two questions.
Two questions. This is from James Lagruta. They say, Professor, yesterday I was on the Hill delivering blessed copies of Pope Francis's encyclical. How do I say that?
Encyclical.
Encyclical.
You don't need to give the name.
Okay. Along with fellow Catholics to advocate for the care of creation and to address climate change. I thought about you and your books when I spotted a Stand with Israel sign and an Appeal to Heaven flag outside of a member's office. Any thoughts or advice?
I'm not sure who the member was or what that represented, but Pope Francis was a very important voice for tolerance. Not totally. He was still hidebound with a lot of old church doctrines, but given the church, he was fairly advanced and certainly was very eloquent about the need to deal with catastrophic climate change, as indicated in that encyclical that you point out. Unfortunately, the MAGA crowd doesn't really care what the Pope says, what the scriptures really mean, what the teachings of Jesus are. Their politics are not contrary to what Mike Johnson tells you.
What? No, Mike Johnson.
Can you imagine?
No, whatever Mike Johnson tells me is...
It comes right from the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, their politics is not dictated by the Bible, but rather their reading of the Bible and of church encyclicals is dictated by their politics. I have yet to see, and I've been around a very long time, conservative Christians take a stand against interest. Somehow, all of their readings of the teachings of Jesus, the Bible, somehow conform to all of their personal and practical interests.
That's so weird.
Isn't that weird? Like keeping male control over the Catholic Church and forbidding women from being pastors in the Southern Baptist Convention churches. Imagine that. Somehow, their reading of the Bible, of teachings of Jesus, somehow sustains the male power structure in these organizations. Imagine that.
Our final question of the night is from our Discord.
Oh, by the way.
Yes.
That's all in my book. That's all. I have a whole chapter on that in Conservative at the Core, A New History of American Conservatism. And remember, they can win this, right?
Yes, you can win this in our messaging contest.
Yes.
All right.
And please help us to get to 250,000 subscribers so you can see my mustache.
That'd be funny.
Are we done, or we have one more question?
Well, you said two. It's up to you.
One more.
All right.
Quickie.
Biden 2028, one of our Discord members says, Hi, Professor. Did you watch Trump's NATO summit visit? What did you make of it?
Well, it was certainly more positive, one would have to say, than previous NATO visits when, he really pretty much dissed the organization. However, and one positive thing was that other countries, and you got to give Trump some credit for that, seem to be stepping up with their defense spending, which is going to be essential, given that the Trump administration does not seem very much inclined to sustain the valiant Ukrainians, and that may fall on the Europeans. So I give him some credit for that. But I was astounded when he was asked, would you honor the article, the mutual defense article of NATO, which basically says an attack on one member is an attack on all. And you know what he said, Sam?
Tell me.
He dodged it. He said, well, depends upon your definition. Are you kidding me? What he should have said, of course, I respect the integrity of every NATO member and will fully enforce the mutual defense guarantees. But he didn't say that.
All right, with that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for this evening. There will be no post show tonight. I have some friends visiting from out of town, so I'm going to go hang out with them.
Well, that should be fun.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So that is it for the Lichtman Live universe tonight. Dad, what are your final words to the people?
Thank you for the great, insightful questions. Sorry I didn't know who Michael Bolton was, but maybe you meant John Bolton. And I think I showed you history is relevant. You know, what happened way back in 476 AD informs, believe it or not, the challenges that we face today. The past is certainly prologue.
Thank you, sir. And we surpassed 1,000 likes, so thank you all for that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good night.